Excellent.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's Inspiring Leadership series. I'm very lucky to have a guest who I met through Remitly, one of our joint clients that both this guest and I enjoy working with massively. They're such an inspiring group led by Matt and Josh. And this man is very untypical. And I've really enjoyed, from the moment we started to chat about how to collaborate and give the best service we can to Remitly, we just struck it off. And also, he's a great supporter of Cornell University. And I got a Cornell University sweat top, which I wear with pride instead of the Harvard one when I went to Harvard. So very great to have you on. Would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much, Jonathan. I'm Jordan Berman. I'm the founder and CEO of OFC. We're a creative communications agency and video production studio. And I'm coming to you from beautiful Princeton, New Jersey, which is also home of that Cornell University rival, Princeton University, which I can see directly across the street. Great to be here.
Yeah, and great to have you with us. And thank you, Jordan. We were talking before we went on air about inspiring leaders. That you, when I asked you, who would you think of as a couple of inspiring leaders, and what qualities do you admire about them? Would you like to say who you find as inspiring leaders, and you'd like to give a shout out for them?
Yeah, I really have the privilege of kind of a passport into a lot of our clients, and not only interviewing a lot of these executives, but helping them communicate and carry out programs. One of our most important partners is PepsiCo, and Kirk Tanner, who runs the PepsiCo beverages group of North America, is just amazing how he steered the company through so much change and innovation, building incredible brands, bringing the company through COVID. It's a real treat to be able to be a part of that extended team. And we also have spent so much time working with AT&T, my former employer, actually. And when I look at Randall Stevenson, who really helped build the organization, just led it through so many different periods. I feel like I've really had a front row seat to leadership masterclasses, and that's been a real treat of being on the creative agency side in support of these companies.
Yeah, and with Randall and with Kirk, if you were to pick two or three qualities that stuck with you, and you thought, I need to learn from that, perhaps I'll actually follow that example. What qualities did you like, Jordan?
Well, I think both, and especially, Kirk, given the retail nature of PepsiCo's business, it's a business that's about real estate. Every inch in the grocery store, there's a battle to bring your products to market. And one of the things I've always loved about Kirk's style is he's in the stores, he's on locations. He really is a man of the people. And to know that the core driver of PepsiCo is building these brands, but really building relationships with their retail partners, that is super inspiring, especially when you've got an organization that has such a tremendous frontline workforce that are in the warehouses, they're in the trucks, they're in the stores, merchandising, selling, manufacturing, that entire go-to-market. I mean, you've got to be incredible at logistics, but you've got to be incredible storytellers. You've got to be amazing at building relationships. And PepsiCo is such an academy type of company that they just produce incredible leaders. And of course, I love all the beverages. So keep me hydrated.
Well, that is great. And the lovely thing is, Jordan, is, you're the CEO yourself of your own. You founded it and you run OFC TV, which is this amazing creative communications agency. But storytelling is a great love for you, as it is for me. And I think I've always sort of come into it by default, in the fact that I think they call us neurodiverse. I'm dyslexic and dyscalculia are two of the problems I have. I couldn't probably even spell either of them, being dyslexic as I am. But therefore, for me, it's the storytelling and it's the connecting with people that I find so special. What got you into storytelling?
Well, first of all, I've always been a consumer of entertainment and stories, and I've found that I've always wanted to know the why behind things, and I would find that if I was only told, here's the to do, or even the how, but I lacked the why, it was something that just I never felt truly on board. And I've always been a curious person, and I think my parents brought me up that way. But when I really understood the why, and it was told to me in a way that had a journey, an arc to it, that really resonates. And I think it resonates on a very fundamental human level, being around the campfire, the way oral history is shared, how we're inspired to overcome adversity. It's through stories. I mean, what is culture? Culture is storytelling. And so for me personally, I've always been just intrigued by stories, captured by them. And it's something I've always done, but it was only relatively recently in my career that I realized, wait a second, this can be a profession. And so this journey of self-discovery throughout my career, leading me to where I am now, has really been me getting in touch with my inner storyteller and realizing this is a purpose, this is a vocation.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You and I were also talking about American legends like General David Petraeus and Admiral Bill McRaven, and how they are both great storytellers, and particularly Bill McRaven, who, as we were discussing, I'm very excited that he will, in the future weeks and months, be coming on the podcast as a guest, thanks to David. And I will always remember his stories in the commencement address in 2014, and just the special forces experience, and swimming with the sharks, and this little story about no one has yet been eaten by a shark, but if one does go for you, then turn and face it and hit it on the nose, because that's the way you got to get rid of them. Because in life, you're going to be circled by some sharks, and you're going to have to turn and face them and deal with them. And I thought, just those stories, they stay with me. And his book, Sea Stories, literally stories, it's one of his books, and then First Make Your Bed. This lovely thing about, first, you make your bed, because at the end of the day, you come back to a made bed, a bed that you made. And I mean, you can remember his stories. And it's one of the things in watching some of the videos that you and your team have produced for different people. They're just really well put together and very much appealing and catchy. Not too much stuff, but just it catches you. So congratulations. I do think you do it well. Let's talk about that life of yours. You mentioned your parents really helped you to be a curious person. Perhaps take 5-10 minutes, shape a bit of your life and how you've become the CEO and the storyteller you are today in this creative agency.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, I actually live my life according to a fortune cookie. Literally, I have the fortune still in my wallet today. And that fortune is one must dare to be himself or herself, however frightening or strange that self may prove to be. And that fortune cookie actually, it opened my eyes to this idea that, your gut always knows kind of who you are and where you need to go, but we don't always listen to it. And my life and my life's journey has very much been trying to get in touch with that internal compass and actually follow it versus following expectations others have on me. And I like to think of my life in kind of 3 chapters, the classic story structure, the beginning, middle. I'm not at the end yet. I'll be 50 this year. Hopefully I've got plenty of story left. But for me, growing up in the suburbs of New York City, I had a wonderful family. My father, Mark Berman, was an accountant. Then he moved into a finance role with a manufacturing company, but just a great man, very much about working hard, treating people with respect, treating everyone with respect. One of the things he did was he would come together with the union and help hammer out agreements. And I remember meeting some of the union folks, and he had such a great relationship with them, and he was on management. And so as I was thinking about college, I came across this School of Industrial and Labor Relations at Cornell University. It's like, what is this ILR school? And the ILR school was founded to bring labor and management together, to elevate the study of the people side of business, management, organizational behavior, human resources, things along those lines. And I realized this is a place for me. I'm intrigued by the stories about business, but the human aspect is really what intrigued me. And growing up, I was very precocious. I was very ambitious. I wanted to do well. I wanted to work hard. And I even remember asking my father, Dad, I'd love to get a drum set. I actually played the saxophone and I wanted to get a drum set. I said, Dad, would you and Mom get me a drum set? He goes, Jordan, you'll have to buy it yourself. And I remember that, seeing that as a challenge, and working jobs, shoveling snow, babysitting, you name it, any way to save a little bit of money. And after about 2.5 years, when I bought that drum set, my dad said, this is one of the probably most prideful moments to watch you accomplish something that took work. So I took that with me to college. And believe it or not, I think I was probably even a little more intense than I needed to be. I got to Cornell, and there I am with a group of students who are all the best in their high schools. They were all valedictorians. They were president of the student government. They had played sports. And so when I got to Cornell, my initial mission was, I'm going to prove that to myself and to others that I should be here. So I was extremely intense, very focused on my time. And graduating from Cornell, I was very excited about getting into business. And I joined a great American company, Black & Decker. And it was an opportunity for me to learn how business is done, learn about this entire industry. When Home Depot was starting to expand, Black & Decker had launched this brand called DeWalt Power Tools, their professional power tool division. And I was part of this event marketing team that I drove a yellow power tool van coming out of an Ivy League university. I'm in Boston. 5 of my classmates were at Harvard Law School, and I was the guy driving a yellow power tool truck to their Harvard Law School parties, where people would often mistake me for the plumber coming to the dorm to fix the faucet. And the humility you learn about working with men and women who use tools for a living, and realizing that, hey, I can bring value to them and understand them. Well, I've always loved creativity, and that journey from Black & Decker into the advertising agency business was something that was really exciting for me. Understanding, how do you tell a story from a brand perspective? How do you bring together a team? Because I was an account executive. My role was to be a quarterback where we had our production people, our creative people, our media people, our accounting people, and bring that together to further a brand story. And then going from the advertising world into the entertainment world. I worked at Showtime, which is part of the Viacom and Paramount organization. And I was in this area in online marketing. This was 2000. So the internet was still very much in its infancy. And the exciting thing for me was to be at a television network, a cable network, but being the guy to figure out, how do we exist to tell stories in a burgeoning digital era? And for me, it was about, how do you translate a television experience to an interactive two-way experience on all sorts of devices? And at Showtime, where I earned my MBA at NYU Stern School of Business at night. The company actually sponsored me to get my MBA. I really started thinking about innovation. And after 6 years at Showtime, I started to see what was happening and where the kind of digital evolution was going, and it was going mobile. It was this device, the mobile phone, was sort of this epicenter of creativity and innovation. So I joined AT&T Mobility, which originally was called Singular. And my task was to figure, how do we tell stories via video on mobile devices? And my first assignment was to build a relationship with Showtime's arch enemy, HBO, or home box office. And so my first project was collaborating with HBO, MTV, WWE Wrestling, Saturday Night Live, and all these incredible entertainment brands that were all trying to figure out, how do we tell stories in a mobile era? And once AT&T launched the iPhone as the exclusive partner with Apple and Steve Jobs, it was an entirely new industry. So being in that kind of big bang moment, where I like to call it the rule of thumb, where literally the thumb and that mobile screen are the dominant source of media for a new generation, was super exciting. Well, as I was at AT&T, I was giving a presentation at a conference, and it was all about storytelling and brands and entertainment. And this guy comes up to me after, he goes, "Hey, Jordan, we should collaborate." And I'm like, "Oh, who do you work for?" And he says, "MTV." And I said, I've heard of MTV. Of course, I lived on MTV. I grew up on MTV as someone born in the 70s who really grew up in the 80s. MTV was youth culture. So I actually left AT&T, joined MTV to run a large group that would integrate brands into our programming and promotions. So if you're PepsiCo and you want to be a part of youth culture, we've got to not just bring you a 30-second spot. We've got to thread you into the fabric of the storytelling of the content. But something really interesting happened at MTV. And it was twofold. One is I realized I've got a tremendous amount of energy. I've got a tremendous amount of ideas. The culture at MTV is very particular. It's a very interesting at that time in terms of somewhat, I'd say, a siloed approach. And I'm the type of person that really likes to work across silos, bring ideas, bring innovation, especially coming out of a mobile first company like AT&T. And at the time, MTV was still very much a cable network. I'm talking about 2010. And the second thing that happened is I saw some research that said 2 p.m. is the peak for online video and social media. And we're talking YouTube, we're talking the early days of Facebook, but MySpace. And I realized that the cat video had been conquering the coffee break. And as I looked across the 40 employees that were in my department, I was the senior vice president of integrated marketing at MTV. I had this group of millennials, and they were all on their phones watching video during what would otherwise be a coffee break. And I had this aha moment. If I could create content that reflected the context of where people are watching these video stories, I might have the seed of a business. So I left MTV and I set out to build a storytelling company that would engage the at-work audience. And there really was no such thing as the at-work audience. There was the audience going to work, the commute, and then the audience going back to work. But at work was this really new phenomenon. And what it ended up happening is, I ended up creating OFC around this idea of how do we inject storytelling and entertainment value into company communications, because you're competing for your own colleagues' attention with TikTok, with YouTube, with Facebook, with Instagram, with Snapchat. And here we are. So OFC, I launched it in 2012, and we count clients like PepsiCo, AT&T, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Medtronic, Remitly, and others as our clients.
Well, what great clients. What a great story as well. And many things triggered as I was listening to that. One is I relate to your intensity. One of the things looking back on various generals as they later became at the time was saying to me, John, just don't be so intense. You're just a little calm down. And actually, I don't know whether people experience this, but listening to you is like drinking from a fire hydrant. There's so much ideas and energy and power coming out of you. So always, of course, the skill is how can you have less but more, less but better, as they would say, because there's so much from you, so much experience. And I find I've learned somehow to slow it down occasionally, not always. I was away on holiday in Dubai with my two daughters, Harriet and Brownie, who are both engaged and about to get married, staying at the Hilton hotels, which Ben Gugerman, who was on the podcast a couple of episodes before you, very kindly, encouraged us to go there and made sure that we were looked after when we were there. But when Harriet gets really excited, she just speaks at double speed. And so we were all laughing about this and how we're just like, let's just be less intense as a family, if that's possible. Great stories. And I love the idea of the 3 episodes, the 3 chapters of our lives. I was thinking about ours, but everything that happens to you, as you mentioned Steve Jobs and the iPhone and AT&T, he was talking when he was alive about joining our dots up in reverse when we look back on our life and how we can make sense and create a story. Because of course, a story is we take a lot of data and we polish it up and we make it into something. Sometimes it has, as some politicians have a habit of doing so, like Boris Johnson in our country and the Donald in yours. They can polish the story up so much that you have to wonder whether it's at all true. As my old Sergeant Major would rudely say, sir, you can't polish a turd. So I'm hoping the stories aren't necessarily that bad. But great stories that you have, and huge experience which you're now bringing to your clients, and lucky them. In all the experiences you've had in your almost 50 years life, Jordan, what would it be a happiest, proudest moment in life or work, and what would be a darkest moment, and what you learned from both of them? Because everything teaches us something.
Yeah. What's been interesting for me is that both my happiest and darkest moments have kind of been at this nexus of both my personal and professional life. And I think for a lot of people with ambition that want to do great things, there is sacrifice in both, and this idea of balance. It's never a steady state. It's a constant recalibration. So let me start with my happiest moment. So in 2004, I became a dad. My son Dean was born. That same year, I graduated from the part-time MBA program at NYU Stern. And at that same time, I became a producer for the first time. So I was actually working at Showtime Networks, and I had an idea, and I had met a gentleman who had started a video syndication business where he would aggregate hundreds and thousands of websites, and he created this video player, and the video player would be syndicated across all these websites. So he would aggregate this tremendous audience of millions of views. And he said, Jordan, you're at Showtime. You must know about great show ideas. I need a show that I could bring to Honda that's about young professionals, because they're launching a new car called the Honda Fit, this compact car. Do you have any thoughts? Now, I'd been working in corporate America for a number of years, and my life was spent in beige fabric-covered cubicles under fluorescent lights. And I said, I've got an idea for a show. Extreme Home Makeover is a very popular show. They make over your home. No one's done it in a cubicle. Imagine if I found someone who loved Paris. What if we were to turn their cubicle into the Eiffel Tower? He goes, I love it. Let's pitch it to Honda. So, of course, I told my boss at Showtime, I've got this kind of fun little side project. Is it okay if I pursue it like after hours? He goes, sure, go for it. You're a marketing guy. You're not in programming. So I go out to Honda's agency and I say, it's called Cube Fabulous. Defy cubicle conformity. We're going to celebrate people bringing their whole selves to work by turning their office or their workspace into an expression of who they are. They bought it. I then had to figure out, how do I create a show? I sold it. I have a budget. I have no idea how to produce a show. So I call my sister, Tammy, whose roommate was a video producer. And she says, Jordan, you have the idea and you've got the money. You can now just hire anybody to help produce it. So I brought on this guy, Dave Goldberg, and we hired this crew, and we hired these incredibly creative people. We ended up producing a hit show. We did 18 episodes that not only Honda sponsored, we got Monster.com and AOL on board. We generated millions of views. And the two young producers that we helped to bring on board ended up becoming the creators of Pawn Stars on the History Channel, Brent Montgomery and Colby Gaines. So there I was at this moment where these incredibly creative people came together to take an idea I had and actually teach me through the process how to become a producer. So this moment of coming up with the idea, pitching the idea, and then mobilizing it by bringing a team that had skills I didn't know how to use, where I could learn from them, and the result was something even better than I thought. This all happened in 2004, the birth of my son, graduation, and creation of Cube Fabulous. So it was really an incredible year. Now let me go to the flip side of that. In 2015, one of my largest clients, my largest client was Darden Restaurants. Darden Restaurants is well known in the United States for Olive Garden, Capitol Grill, Yard House, Seasons 52, Bahama Breeze. They also had Red Lobster. Well, they were one of my first and most important clients. And we were taking their training videos and saying, instead of training 100,000 employees on the new recipe, why don't we create a culinary competition show called Ultimate Chef, where Two test kitchen chefs compete to win the gold tongs of victory under the watchful eye of your executive chef. So we were doing incredibly creative work that was effective at engaging and inspiring their employees. Well, their entire board was wiped out by Starboard Ventures, a hedge fund, an activist investor. The CEO, Clarence Otis, was resigned, and the team had to cut $100 million of cost. My budget was slashed. So there I was doing incredible work with an amazing client, iconic in the casual dining industry. And in 2015, my budget went from hundreds of thousands of dollars to tens of thousands of dollars. At that same point, I've always been a very involved father. And I just overextended myself. I was coaching Little League Baseball. I was coaching basketball. Even though I don't know how to tie a rope knot, like David Petraeus, I became the Cub Master for my son's Cub Scout troop. Of course, I was very good at making s'mores and rallying the boys and doing camp outs, but I had basically completely overextended myself. And that same year, my father was diagnosed not only with Parkinson's, but with Lewy body dementia. Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia, that was the exact same diagnosis as my comedy hero, Robin Williams. And we were told what to expect. We were told a lack of mobility, a lack of muscle control, and then a deterioration of the mind. And my father had fallen in a store, and that precipitated this diagnosis. The combination of anesthesia and the surgery, in a sense, it almost kind of hit a reset, and he really started this downward spiral. And this is a hero of mine. This is a man who believed in me, always told me to go for it. He was very conservative in his life. He was an accountant. He worked in finance, very much kind of in the box as a thinker, but very creative as a musician, but professionally took very few risks. And my mother, who was really beset by a heavy depression when this happened, I realized I had to step up. And it wasn't just I had to step up. I realized this was my opportunity to repay my father, to be there to help him. And I've got two brothers and a sister. I'm one of four, but I've always been a bit of the leader of our family. And I remember getting together, and I get emotional thinking about it, but getting together my brothers and my sister, telling them, we have to be strong for dad. We have to be strong for mom. Because I had my own company, even though it was struggling and really at the precipice of not even making it, I realized I could actually work from my dad's hospital room. He was actually in a rehab center for several months. So I would actually spend all my days with my dad, going with him to physical therapy, going to neurologists. Then when he came back home, I knew he didn't want to live in a home, and he was 70 years old. I knew he didn't want to be in some type of home. And so I arranged to get him help at home. I spent probably 3 or 4 days of every week at my parents' home, being my dad's champion, and realizing that my wife would have to shoulder the burden with our two children, who were about 11 and 7 at the time. And finally, my father kept getting more ill, and we realized he needed to be in a home where he had 24/7 medical care. And I said to my dad, at this point, his memory was severely affected, his understanding of events, but he had moments of lucidity. And I remember telling my dad, I said, Dad, we need you to get better. We need better care for you. So I found a rehab center and home where you'll have the care you need. And he signed the documentation. And I wasn't quite sure if he even knew really what was happening. When we brought him there, I had to wheel him into this sort of television room with a lot of much older folks, most of whom were women. And I leaned down to give him a kiss and a hug. And I said, Dad, I'll be here tomorrow. And he said to me, he goes, Jordan, I guess this is the end of the road for me. And at that moment, I realized he knew exactly where he was. He passed away 1 month later.
Wow.
And I felt incredibly guilty about bringing him into this home where he was going to get the attention he deserved. But my wife helped me realize, because I felt incredibly guilty, was that I had kept him at home all that time. And it was only the last month where he really needed that attention that he had to be in a home. And it took a while for me to kind of forgive myself for, not being able to save him, and realizing that there are things I can control, there are things I can't control. And so I learned to be at peace with that. And believe it or not, while Olive Garden, from a professional standpoint, Olive Garden ended up going away. About 2 months after my father passed away, I got a call from Pepsi and AT&T. We're both like, we've been sitting on some proposals from you, and we think you're really onto something. We really love the work you've done with Olive Garden and Unilever. Can you come to our headquarters and can we confirm a budget? And I said, well, it was like, there is a God. And so OFC, my personal life, and my wife was just so strong throughout the whole thing. But that being able to navigate life when life throws you, challenges you don't think you can handle, you don't think you're prepared to handle. If you stay in the game, if you stay in the fight, things will change. And that's what I found about business and in life. Stay in the fight, because the tide is going to turn if you give it a chance.
Yeah. Wow. What a tough time to go through. And also this resonates with my own life and my wife, Lee, in that we had Marguerite, Lee's mother, my mother-in-law, living with us here we're in Lincolnshire, in this home for the last 3 years of her life. And we didn't want her to go into a nursing home. And she had heart disease, lungs disease, she had cancer, and she had Alzheimer's. And it was very hard. And I really relate to you for that last month, having looked after him all that time, for that last month, to realize it was the end of the road, that we think they're going to live forever. And of course, they are going to have to get to die at some stage. And I'm a great Stoic philosophy practitioner, and they talk about living a good life and a good death. And it's very hard that I've listened to a number of audiobooks, and there's a lot for us to learn about preparing for death, as if like, it's not going to happen to me, it's going to happen to everybody else, but I'm not going to die. Like, what? Get a life, get real, but get a life, be prepared to get a death. And I know that with my brother Graham, who got savagely attacked and almost died from some severe knife wounds through multiple organs by a psychopath who attacked him, that we talked about my other brother David, who died a year ago, and he was only 3 years older than me. And Graham went, Jonathan, he hasn't gone. He hasn't, he's not with us anymore. People use this language to try and hide the fact he has died, and we don't want to admit it. So I was like, I lost my brother. Well, like, is he in the garden somewhere? Have you just like left him in the amusement arcade or in the supermarket? No, he's died. And I found that quite brutal, but actually quite a reality check. So sharing that tough story about your father with both Lewy body and Parkinson's disease, and relating with Marguerite, who had, as I say, Alzheimer's, and you just know it's only going one way. It's not going to reverse. And my mother had a major stroke and ended up in the nursing home where she had been to visit all the people who were there, and she ended up in the nursing home. And my brothers and I had her in the same nursing home, but it was tough for her. And I think facing up to that, some of those dark moments, but it does teach us a lot. You're right, Jordan. It teaches a lot about the appropriate amount of resilience. Sometimes people are so resilient that they think they can have it all, be it all, do it all, and you can't. And someone once said, everything in life is possible if you're prepared to, 1, pay the price, and 2, live with the consequences. But I have seen time and again, both in my own life and the life of other very intense, very driven people, there is a cost to pay. And sometimes the cost is too high. And you have to stop, recalibrate, and go, is this worth it? And, in your particular case, 2 children, young children, 3 to 4 years apart, and a wife who is supporting you, and the business. And I think sometimes it is about the like the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown, about just tempering what you do and saying no to some stuff in order to say yes to your own health, to your family. So that's just some thoughts which are triggered, and thank you for that. Let's go on to my next thought, which was, there you got some sons. I think you said son, or was it son and daughter? I couldn't hear.
Two boys. Yeah, two boys, Dean and Nate.
Yeah. What age are they now?
So 18 and 15.
Perfect time. So if you went back to visit yourself at that age bracket, 15 to 18, what bit of advice would you say? Now, Jordan, I've come back from the future. I'm giving you some advice from my experience. This matters, this doesn't. What would be your advice?
Growing up, I was very much a type A perfectionist, and I still have those tendencies. And in fact, it reminds me, you talk about commencement speeches. So Conan O'Brien, the comedian, did just a wonderful commencement speech at Harvard University, his alma mater. And he says, here you are. It's as if you're all wearing white tuxedos and you never want them to get dirty. That's not how to live life. Life, in my words, is a laboratory. And I've learned that. I think growing up, especially in high school, wanting to get into a top university. And when I was in the university, thinking I might want to go to graduate school, I've got to have this perfect record. I've got to have a great GPA. I've got to, check all the boxes. And there was a lot of fear of making a mistake and stepping off the right path. And so I always felt a tremendous amount of pressure not to mess up. And yet, as an adult, what I've learned is that the learning happens when you do fail. The learning happens when you make a fool of yourself, maybe. You fall down, you dust yourself off. And it's even something I've learned as an adult practitioner of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. A friend of mine opened up a Jiu-Jitsu studio. And he says, Jordan, I just opened this studio. His name is Mike Leonardi. It's part of Gracie Barra, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I wanted to support him. I said, I'll join. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I doing? And I felt like a toddler. It's a grappling sport. And I felt like a toddler. I had no idea what I was doing. I felt like I was a fool. And I remember I would do anything to stop myself from being tapped out, either someone putting me in a choke move or an arm bar. And I remember Mike sat me down and he said, Jordan, the mat is a place where you want to experiment. There's no winning at practice. Practice is where you need to experiment, where you should take the risks that you might not otherwise do in, say, a competition. And that is really what life is. Life is being willing to make mistakes and learn from them and try not to duplicate those mistakes. But if you're not failing, you're not learning, and you're certainly not stretching yourself. So the thing I would tell my sons, or I would tell a young version of me, maybe with a little less salt in my hair, is it's okay to fail. In fact, it's good to fail. Don't go through life avoiding failure. Seek it out, because otherwise you're not really becoming who you can be.
Beautifully put. And also I resonate because Gracie Barra, the jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, is what my wife and my daughter, Alana, do. And Alana is tiny. She's a wee thing, but she would be like a monkey spider, be crawling all over her mum, Lee. And Lee couldn't sort of shake her off. And there were these grappling and chokes and all sorts. And then Alana fought with a lady who was slightly bigger than her. And she actually fell on her badly, I think, and broke her ankle, I think. So which is going to happen in any kind of sport you do, whether it's skiing. A friend of mine's broken his pelvis skiing and things like that. Skiing is very dangerous, but great fun. But they absolutely loved it. And it was only the fact that it was so far away, the center. They were thinking of setting up their own center here in our town. But they never got around to doing that. One of those many things, oh, good idea, let's do this. But well done on doing the jiu-jitsu. And you're so right. There was another of my leaders said, I learned so much from my mistakes. I think I'll go make a few more because I want
Good
to some more.
attitude.
Yeah, if looking back at your life so far, and you're only in the second or the third chapter so far, because if you can live the 100-year life, depending on how much processed food and how much sugary drink you do have with all your clients, but if we did you know that 93% of Americans metabolically unhealthy because of the standard American diet that we've been having since the 60s, if not before that. So something needs to be done. Perhaps that's your next thing, Jordan. Is
And they're on it, by the way. They're making healthier products.
I hope they are. I hope they are. But I like Dr. Mark Hyman, who I want to get onto this series. I think he's very interesting about functional medicine. It's a whole interesting area. But if there was one thing you could change in your life, you could live your life again, or if there was a crucible moment, which one would you perhaps share with everybody listening?
College for me was certainly a crucible. It was certainly a test. And what's interesting is my oldest son, Dean, recently got accepted to college, and he'll be going to St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. And incredibly excited for him, especially since he has Asperger's. So he's a very bright kid, super motivated, but he has his challenges, especially from a communication standpoint. And when I look back at my life, I realized that, especially in college, that level of intensity I brought, I have a continuing journey of calibrating it. In fact, I'm a big fan of quotations, and one of my favorite quotes is, man does not spontaneously combust; he must light himself on fire. And I look at that as, you've got to inspire yourself. You cannot wait for the moment to strike and suddenly everything's perfect and you've got an idea and you're going to run with it. You really have to kind of create the spark yourself. But at the same point, if you're ambitious, if you want to do something great, and I think of like a David Goggins or a Jocko Willink, some of these incredible, military leaders who are incredible motivators, balance sort of falls to the wayside. And that can be dangerous in terms of building a great life. You may achieve great things, but you're likely not going to build a great life. And for me, it's been about how do I ignite myself and be my true self, bring my energy, my ideas, my enthusiasm, but don't burn myself out in the process. And I think during the COVID era, you saw a lot of people coming to grips with that, people working 24/7 at home, at work, on every device. And in a connected age, the advice and things I would probably change a little bit is I'd probably get more sleep, and I am getting more sleep. I would maybe be better to myself. I have a bit of a maniacal work ethic. And that has been rewarded in business. That has been rewarded in school. But it isn't necessarily rewarded in life, mental health, relationships, etc. So for me, the kind of unbounded energy and enthusiasm, that you really need to give yourself a break and temper that. Be kinder to yourself, because I can drive myself tougher, longer, stronger than anyone externally ever could. And it's that self-regulation to realize I need to have someone to love, I need to have something to hope for, and I need to have something to do. And all those three things are critical.
Yeah, I think you definitely need a good coach. And here's Willow, who's going to join us on this podcast.
That's your coach.
Yeah, she could hear your dog barking in the background. She's going, "Hey, can I join this podcast?" She's just 5 months old. She's a working cocker, and she loves to be a film star. So perhaps we'll have to have her on some of the shots. But in all seriousness, it is one of the things that both I try and live by example myself in getting that sense of balance. But also, I think it's the the thing that some of my coaching clients have appreciated more than anything is bringing that sense of the whole, the integrated, as opposed to the disintegrated life, where all the elements of what I call the inspired leadership compass, which we're going to be talking about now, are you get each of them covered to a sufficient level where you can focus on what you're really good at. So let's go around them very briefly. We've just quick fire questions here, Jordan. Moral quotient, your true north, living life according to values. I don't want to hear what your specific ones are, but when you found you've slipped off your moral compass, your true north, what have you done? One thing you've done to bring yourself back onto true north as far as your moral quotient goes?
It's funny. My moral compass is I want to be a good guy. There's an amazing book, Cormac McCarthy, called The Road, which was made into a movie with Viggo Mortensen. And in it, it's the story of a father and his young son. And they have to traverse this apocalyptic landscape. And the father really has to do anything to save his son. And at one point, the son asks his dad, and he says, "Dad, are we the good guys?" And his dad said, "Yes, we're the good guys." And to me, being a good guy is being generous. It's being optimistic and positive, and it's giving people the benefit of the doubt and really working so that everyone can win. And what I've found is that I have a competitive spirit and I want to win, and I have to really balance that with, hey, especially in the world of business, we all want to provide for our families. We all want to do great work. And so really what I've tried to do is always kind of counterbalance that competitive spirit with, hey, am I being a good person? Is OFC being a good organization so that by people interacting with me and my team and our company, are they going to be better off because of that? And so even my competitors, I'll be at conferences. We may create a highlight video at a leadership conference. I'll invite my competitors to stand in front of the camera because I want to learn from them as well. To me, if you're successful, you can actually increase the size of the pie. It's not just about getting my piece and getting a bigger percentage. I think you truly, if you're adding value, you can increase the value to everyone. There doesn't have to be always a winner and a loser.
Spot on. Never work with children or animals, they always say. At the moment, I have a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old grandchild living with us at the moment for a few months, and a 5-month-old puppy. So that was quite funny. Thank you, Jordan, for just being with us.
Certainly.
I think I love that whole idea of the road, the good guys, what you do, getting yourself back on track. What about a sense of meaning and purpose? That's the second of the 8 components that I found make people inspire leaders. What would you say gives your life almost in a sentence? What gives your life meaning and purpose, Jordan?
Yeah, I love surfacing stories from unconventional perspectives. As a storyteller, I've worked in a lot of different companies where I've helped tell stories, whether it's Showtime, the cable network, whether it was MTV, whether it was in the advertising industry. And I've been involved in all sorts of content creation, but I love stories that help people realize they can be more than they even think they are. And we've launched a project recently called Dropping Knowledge. And Dropping Knowledge is all about inspiring underrepresented middle school and high school students, largely Black and Hispanic students in the United States, about how they can invent the future by pursuing STEM concepts, science, technology, engineering, math, and careers. And there is a major representation issue in the US when technology companies are trying to have a representative workforce that reflects the nation. There are not enough diverse engineers, data analysts, computer scientists. And so for me, creating Dropping Knowledge, which in its essence is connecting the dots from the things young people love, fashion, video games, music, and connecting those dots to the technologies and the science that enables them. then you see an aha moment. And that's the type of storytelling I love, impacting people in positive ways.
Yeah, it's lovely. And that's why it's so nice connecting you with Lee, with her charity for vulnerable girls going through abuse, modern day slavery, trafficking, and mental health issues. And thank you for the connection that you've set up there. Health is the next. Brain health and physical health. I mean, there you saw the shocker of what happened to your father. And what we're now being told, of course, is that we actually have much more control over our brain health and our physical health than we actually gave ourselves credit. Oh, it's in the gene, nothing I can do about it. But epigenetics and the food that we eat, the sleep that we have, the exercise that we do has a massive difference on us. So if there's 2 tips that you'd give us from you personally, Jordan, that you found has helped you now you've had that bit of a shocker with your father. I'm really sad and sorry for you, what you had to go through. I know I learned a lot from both my mother and my mother-in-law dying and the way that they died and the impact of their lifestyle that it had on their they say that we really want our health span to match our lifespan, but sadly too many people, their lifespan has a certain point, but their health span has ended some 15 to 10 years beforehand. So top tip on each, very quickly, what would you say, Jordan?
Yeah. The first one is building exercise as a habit. Every morning I wake up, I knock out 40 push-ups in a row, and then I say the word overtime and I do another 10. Every single morning, if I'm feeling bad, good, indifferent, I knock them out. And then the other thing I do from a health perspective is anytime, which is all the time, I have a challenging work project, I jump on my mountain bike and I just ride through the mud, the sleet, the snow, whatever. And when I push myself physically, not only do I get those endorphins pumping, but any work issue I had, whether it was a conflict with a client, immediately disappears because I just put my body through a trial, going up the largest hill I could find, the muddiest bog I could go through. That's one piece, exercise as a habit. And then the second one is get yourself a dog. My dog happens to be in my office right now, sleeping on the couch. And a lot of people think getting a puppy is like getting a baby. It's not. It's like getting a fitness instructor that you can cuddle with whenever you want. I love walking with my dog. I love hiking with my dog. And there are times when I see my dog laying down and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to lay down right next to my dog. My son said the most brilliant thing ever. This is my 18-year-old son, Dean, when he was younger. He said, Dad, I really love Kayla so much. I'm like, what do you love about Kayla? Kayla's our dog. He says, Dad, she doesn't care about anything. And this was when my son, who I mentioned has Asperger's, was really having a tough time fitting in at middle school. And we got this dog, and she was just loyal. She'd lay in his bed right next to him. Doesn't matter how tough things are, no judgment, just love. And of course, I love the idea that, you know, we've got to really be the people our dog thinks we are.
I love that. No, and we got 2, and giving Archie, who's the older, 2.5, and every day 2 walks a day. You know, my wife and I had a run along the canal this morning. We got into a bit of a habit of doing this. We get up first thing, and half an hour later we're in the car, drive down to the canal and have a run along. Don't have to be very far, but just along the canal and then back. You know, in the morning frost, it was just beautiful. And you're so right. You can't ignore a dog. If you're really a proper human, you can't ignore the dog. They need that exercise and they need the company. And, you know, just as we had there with Willow, who was telling me, hey, I need to go out. You know, you can't just ignore it, because otherwise with a puppy, you'll end up with a little gift that you never planned on.
And Jonathan, is there anything more humbling than having to clean up after your dog, no matter what accomplishments you have?
It was George Bush who said, you know, here I am, I've finished being president, and what I'm doing is I'm collecting poop in the garden. He said, it's a good leveler. I love that one. We'll just dip into emotional intelligence. We'll leave out the other ones because we've had so many good chats already. We'll then look at executive teams, your favorite book, and your top tip. So emotional and social intelligence. It is interesting when we have children who have certain neurodiverse issues. Sometimes we, the parents, have some of the similar traits, like we might be fully intense or all in, or whatever it might be. How have you developed emotional and social intelligence, reading your own emotions, reading others, such as your sons, and reading the environment, when sometimes we can be so intense that we miss certain subtle cues, particularly from our partners, who often go, "You're so busy with work that you've forgotten me." So what's
Been there.
what's your top tip? I thought you might. I reckon I resemble that remark. All right.
Yeah.
What's your tip?
Yeah. So as both a husband of 22 years, my wife Elizabeth, who by the way runs human resources for the parent company of the 76ers NBA basketball team and the New Jersey Devils hockey team. So she's got an incredible career. My relationship with her, and being the father of 2 teenagers, really being able to listen. I can talk. I love to tell stories, but listening, wow, that can be really difficult. And really hearing what people are saying, and avoiding the jump to a solution, because what I've seen is so often people just want to be heard. They need to be heard. And really the most effective you can be isn't always identifying the right answer. It's often asking the right question. And I found that if I can ask the right question of my sons, even of my wife or of my team, that's 90% of leadership right there.
Yeah, it's so true. And in fact, one of the most special moments, there's been many special moments in my own life, was just recently taking my 2 daughters, Harriet and Bradley, who are 29 and 28, to Dubai. We just got back last night for 4 nights. And it was my way of just saying, "I love you, I'm your dad." Lee, my wife, said, "Look, you go with them and go and have a special time." And we got a son and a daughter, Lee's son and daughter. So we married, we brought 2 children each. She said, "Go and have a special time with them," because they're both getting married this year. And it's going to be a really sort of special way, or rather they've got engaged. One's getting married this year. One may get married at some stage. Hasn't yet decided when that time's going to be. But it was really special time. And what they said was the fact that you're there for them and you listen to them. And I'm still working on not interrupting. And there's Nancy Klein's book, she's my great mentor, Nancy. She's an American lady who's now in her 70s. And her book is called The Promise. And the long version of the book is the promise that changes everything. I won't interrupt you. And it's work in progress all our lives, Jordan, because in your enthusiasm to share your idea or my idea, we'd love to jump in and finish off your sentence or tell you something else or pip what you've done if you're a type A personality like you and I are. And let me get an even better story than your story. And I've got another story. And we just shut the F up and listen. So I love the one that you're working on that too, because gosh, I am too. Executive teams, your top tip for how do you create a high performing team when you've got a toxic team? What have you done in a nutshell?
Yeah, I think culture is everything. And unfortunately, a lot of organizations may have a articulated group of values, but it's only a value if you hire, fire, and promote based on them. And really, if you tolerate behavior, that's what you're valuing, if you tolerate it. And so throughout my career, I've always tried to be direct in a very human and gentle way. But when there are challenges and when people aren't aware of behaviors, maybe no one brought it up to them, and that happens all the time. Or, well, they're a good performer, they're smart. What I find is if I'm helping a leader develop, if I'm coaching a leader, they need that honesty, that there's always growing and improvement. And so I've had conversations that aren't easy to have, to say, you may think you're being direct, you're being negative, you're being cynical. If someone is allowing bad behavior, hey, it's not that you're just allowing it. In a sense, you're defining the behavior that's acceptable, and we can't do that. And there's always that short-term pain of ripping the Band-Aid off, but the long-term benefit is always worth it.
Yeah, so great advice, really great advice. Penultimate one is your favorite book on leadership and why you recommend that one. and then we'll go into, I'll ask you to introduce yourself again, and we'll do the 2-minute top leadership tip. So favorite book, which one are you choosing?
So I have one of my favorite books right here, which is The Agenda Mover by Samuel Bachrach, who is a mentor of mine and a professor emeritus at Cornell University. He actually was my teacher when I was 18 years old. He taught organizational behavior. And this book is all about pragmatic leadership, because a pragmatic leader breaks organizational inertia. Companies get stuck. And what Sam talks about, there are really two things a great leader does. It's around discovery and it's about delivery. In discovery, it's about understanding the environment, and it's also about developing ideas. But on the delivery, you've got to mobilize people. So there's an aspect of being able to navigate a political environment, and then you've got to sustain momentum through managerial capability. So The Agenda Mover by Sam Bachrach, love it, super practical, highly recommend it.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, Jordan, would you just introduce yourself, tell us what your organization does, and give us your 2-minute top leadership tip?
Hi, I'm Jordan Berman. I'm the founder and CEO of OFC. We're a creative communications agency and video production studio that injects entertainment and storytelling into critical business initiatives. My top tip for leadership is the idea that attitude aces ability. And it's based on one of my favorite bands of all time, The Clash. And the story goes that Mick Jones, who was the lead guitarist and founder of the band, was looking for a bass guitarist. And he's at this club in London, and he sees this guy who has the right attitude, who has the right integrity, the right creativity. And his name is Paul Simonon. And he goes up to Paul and he says, "Paul, I'm looking for a new bass player of my band." And Paul says, "I'm in. There's only one problem. I don't know how to play the bass." And Mick says, "Don't worry about that. We'll figure out how to teach you the bass." He literally teaches Paul the very specific fret hand positioning to record their first album. Paul didn't even know how to play the bass when he recorded. He just knew the hand movements. Paul went on to become an incredible bassist, an iconic member of The Clash who named the band, as well as created their signature look and style, and is even on the cover of the London Calling album, where he's smashing his Fender guitar, which is probably the most iconic image in punk rock music. So attitude aces ability. Hire for attitude, and the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, I love that one. Your attitude defines your altitude was an old comment from my general. And thank you, Jordan. I've thoroughly enjoyed that. And I'm sure everybody takes a lot from your stories and from your experience. And I wish you every success. People are very lucky if they get you and your creative agency working with them. So thank you for being on the Inspiring Leadership podcast.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure and an honor, Jonathan. Much appreciated.